Yo, what's going on, everybody? You are watching Vikings Now by Chat Sports. My name is Patrick Siepman, and coming up on today's show, we got a big-time update on the Vikings potentially trading for a quarterback before the NFL trade deadline tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And then also, I do want to talk about 5 players on the Vikings roster who impressed Week 9 versus the Lions. Going to leave J.J. McCarthy out of this, Justin Jefferson, Christian Dare. So I want to talk about more of the unsung heroes in that game. So we'll dive into that on the second half of today's show. But I do want to say thank you guys so much. We are closing in on our next milestone here of 66,000 subscribers. That's an unreal number. Sometimes it doesn't feel real to me, so I do want to quickly say thank you to all of you guys who have hit that subscribe button. I know we ask you guys to do it a lot. Can be a little tedious, can be a little annoying, but it truly does help us out here. And we just need 185 more subs to get to our next milestone. So if you guys are brand new here, hit that subscribe button today. Lock us in. Daily videos around your Minnesota Vikings. All right, so it was Adam Schefter who dropped a recent article talking about the Minnesota Vikings and them potentially trading for a quarterback. Let's see what Schefter had to say. Saying if that was Minnesota's thought process before the season, sources believe it would be the same now. With the Vikings still needing an experienced veteran backup quarterback for J.J. McCarthy, league sources believe Minnesota still could make a move for a quarterback by Tuesday's deadline. And, when I heard this report initially, I just kind of got a little frustrated because this should have been something that was handled in the offseason. But the Vikings, in my opinion, value the comp pick formula way too much as a big reason why they didn't bring in a Joe Flacco, who just had 470 yards and 4 touchdowns yesterday. I promise you, if we would have brought in Joe Flacco, our record would have been way better than 4-4 right now, possibly 5-3. Who knows? Maybe even 6-2. But this should have been handled in the offseason because it wasn't only Flacco. It was a guy like Gardner Minshew, Jacoby Brissett. There are other veteran options out there where now you're at the NFL trade deadline. Carson Wentz, who you brought in right before the season, out for the remainder of the year. You don't have a veteran in that room. And I just think having that veteran in the ear of J.J. McCarthy and also Max Brosmer would have a lot of value. But Schefter mentioned these 3 guys as quarterbacks that could be brought in. He, of course, had to throw in Kirk Cousins. I think this is absolutely ludicrous. He also mentioned Jameis Winston. And then he also mentioned New York Giants quarterback, former starter, Russell Wilson. Now, in terms of these 3 guys, Vikings shouldn't trade for any of these quarterbacks. Kirk Cousins, absolutely not. We can just kick the tires on that. I think it's a ludicrous rumor. I think people just use Kirk Cousins' name connected with the Minnesota Vikings to get clicks, to get headlines. And also, Jameis Winston would be a fun option, but is that the personality of a veteran backup quarterback you want to bring in? Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. I would probably say maybe it's not. And then Russell Wilson, I just have no interest in Russell Wilson. I just think that guy, he's got an inflated ego. He doesn't really feel like a Minnesota Viking at the end of the day. He feels like a big city guy. Like he is honestly perfect in New York being the backup to Jackson Dart. So in terms of those 3 guys, Kirk, Jameis, and Russ, I'm saying no to all of them. And it kind of sounds like Kevin O'Connell saying no as well. Today during his press conference, Kevin Seifert asked if he is interested in adding a veteran quarterback at the trade deadline. Kevin O'Connell says he's pretty comfortable with the quarterback group right now. Talked extensively about John Wolford, signed to the practice squad last week, said they hope to get him onto the 53. So it was interesting this past weekend. A little nugget from the game. The Vikings didn't elevate a third quarterback, even to be the emergency third quarterback. Now, KOC kind of said they had a, break glass in case of emergency option. I would guess that would be Cam Akers potentially running the quarterback position. You just kind of go into heavy set and you run the Wildcat there. But, clearly the Vikings have faith in Max Brosmer being the backup quarterback. So I'm going to say I doubt they trade for a QB, but it is pretty interesting that guys like Adam Schefter are reporting that the Vikings could be in the market for a backup quarterback because even though on paper does not seem likely whatsoever that they would go out there and trade for a backup quarterback, he's still reporting that they might. I think they're more than comfortable rolling with Max Brosmer as the backup and John Wolford kind of being that veteran option to help be the kind of like the voice of reason, the veteran in that room. So I'm going to say absolutely not in terms of the Vikings trading for a backup quarterback, but you guys be the GM for me. Should the Vikings trade for a QB? You guys let me know your thoughts down below in the comments section. Give me a T for trade. Give me a P for pass. What would you do with the deadline tomorrow? Should the Vikings trade for a QB? All right, let's talk about what Albert Breer now had to say on the Vikings not trading for a quarterback, but the Vikings trading for a cornerback. Now, obviously, I think the cornerback group is probably the weakest position on the Vikings roster right now. And Albert Breer he hit it on the head. He said this: "As for buyers, the Vikings and Colts are among a list of teams looking for corners. The market isn't rich with options, which could make the Rams trading for Roger McCreary, the Browns getting Tyson Campbell, and the Eagles getting Michael Carter look smart for striking a little earlier." And I agree with what he was saying. Like, the Vikings clearly had a need at the cornerback position even before yesterday's game when Byron Murphy and Isaiah Rodgers had a rough showing. But the Vikings need to add another corner because Jeff Okudah was one of the worst starting cornerbacks in the NFL when he was playing. I actually thought Fabian Morrow, who was elevated yesterday, I thought he had a pretty good outing. But still, the cornerback room is super, super thin. And even the top-end talent that you brought in Rodgers and Byron Murphy, aren't really playing too good of football right now. Like Byron Murphy, his PFF grade has almost slipped to below 50. And his coverage grade, 53.8. But also Isaiah Rodgers, I mean, if you take out that one Cincinnati Bengals game, like he's probably grading out in the 40s. Now, Byron Murphy has been targeted 30 times, has allowed 23 receptions for 271 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now, obviously, he's getting the wide receiver 1 assignment a whole lot, so it does make sense that he's giving up a lot of yards and a lot of touchdowns. But same with Isaiah Rodgers. I mean, he gives up deep plays, it feels like, every single game. 328 yards allowed this season on 23 receptions, being targeted 38 times. And, yesterday I thought the Vikings defense had a great performance top to bottom. But the defensive front was the reason why the Vikings defense dominated and why that unit carried this team. It wasn't because of the secondary, even though I thought Harrison Smith had a good game. I thought, Blake Cashman was really good in coverage, but Isaiah Rodgers and Byron Murphy definitely struggled. And also a guy like Josh Metellus, in terms of being that man that's, navigating the middle of the field, I thought he struggled. But the defensive front yesterday, I mean, they got after it. This coming in from Nate Tice tweeting this out, saying the Vikings defense generated 15 quick pressures against the Lions offense yesterday per Next Gen Stats. The 35.7% quick pressure rate is the highest of any team so far this season in the National Football League. It's also the highest rate allowed by the Lions offense since Week 12 of the 2022 season. So clearly the Vikings defense, they weren't just winning up front, they're winning immediately. It's like guys like Javon Hargrave had a great game. I mean, even though Jonathan Grenard didn't have a sack, I thought he was all over the football field. Andrew Van Ginkel was doing his thing. Jonathan Allen was winning early and often on his reps. So the defensive front, that front seven, was the biggest reason why the Vikings were able to get home to Jared Goff 5 times yesterday, and also had some big-time hits on him. Got him off his spot a whole lot. So shout out to the guys up front, but the secondary definitely struggled. So if you guys want the Vikings to add a cornerback and potentially send a message to GM Kwesi adofo-mensah, just give me those skulls down below in the comment section. I think they should. And if you guys want to send a message to the Vikings front office, give me those skulls down below. Now, we'll talk about 5 players who balled out for the Vikings yesterday in Detroit against the Lions. But before we do so, got to tell you guys about today's presenting sponsor, and that is Factor Meals. Now, eat smart at factormeals.com/VikingsChat50 off and plug in that promo code VikingsChat50 off to get 50% off your first box plus free breakfast for 1 year. Now, the fall season always feels like a reset. Between back to school, busier routines, and shorter days, finding time to cook can be tough. That's why I love Factor. Their chef-prepared, dietitian-approved meals make it easy to stay on track and enjoy something comforting and delicious, no matter how hectic the season gets. And I love Factor because they got more variety and more meals. You guys can choose from a wider selection of weekly meal options, including premium seafood choices like salmon and shrimp at no extra cost. They're also going to help you support your wellness goals so you guys can enjoy even more GLP-1 friendly meals and new Mediterranean diet options packed with protein and good-for-you fats. So eat smart at factormeals.com/VikingsChat50 off. Plug in promo code VikingsChat50 off to get 50% off your first box plus free breakfast for 1 whole year. That's code VikingsChat50 off at factormeals.com for 50% off your first box plus free breakfast for 1 year. Get delicious, ready-to-eat meals delivered with Factor. Now, this offer is only valid for new Factor customers with code and qualifying auto-renewing subscription purchase. All right, so the number one guy that impressed me against the Lions yesterday, and then we'll close this book, and we'll move on to Baltimore. But the number one guy, no doubt, being Javon Hargrave. Javon Hargrave was absolutely fantastic, and his PFF grade was great, 81.4, and he was fantastic against the run. His highest run defense grade in a singular game since, I believe, the 2022 season, and he was amazing yesterday in terms of the Vikings winning on early downs because we knew that was going to be the case taking on the Detroit Lions. You got to win early, got to get them in the third and long situations. and then let Brian Flores and exotic blitz schemes and his blitz design really start getting home, and that's what happened. And also those 2 tackles for loss he had, just like I were talking about quick pressures early on in today's show, he did that. 2 quarterback hits, 1 sack. Javon Hargrave, tip my cap to you. You were balling out yesterday. And then same with Eric Wilson. You know he was going to be on this list. I mean, what a pickup this year in free agency. Former Minnesota Viking, went to the Green Bay Packers. Then they brought him back in, and this guy was absolutely unbelievable yesterday. I honestly think PFF kind of screwed him a little bit on his overall grade, only being 63.5. But his pass rush grade was amazing at 73.9. 2 sacks on the day, also had 6 pressures and only allowed 21 yards through the air, and mainly the stuff that he was allowing was just underneath, and he was tackling very well. So I thought Eric Wilson, I mean, the collisions he had hitting the hole, going against Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, I mean, those 2 running backs for Detroit are probably waking up incredibly sore today because of what 55 did to him, but also his running mate, Blake Cashman, had an amazing game. Blake Cashman, we knew how important this guy was to the defense, mainly because of what he does, communication-wise. He's wearing the green dot. He is communicating the Vikings' final adjustments, and he truly does feel like the glue to this defense, where he is the guy that is holding everything together, where, you're trying to get guys in certain spots. Flores runs in a very exotic scheme, and sometimes it's a little challenging when you don't have Blake Cashman to have a guy like Ivan Pace or a guy like Eric Wilson step up and wear that green dot and be that elite communicator. Well, Blake Cashman is that. He is a perfect fit. And even though Jonathan Gennard, the best player on the Vikings defense, I can make an argument that Blake Cashman and Andrew Van Ginkel are the 2 most important players on the defense and the 2 most valuable players because of what they do, not only for themselves, but for other guys. He also had that unbelievable forced fumble on David Montgomery where the Vikings somehow gave up a 3rd and 12 run on that play. But Cashman was able to make a play on the football, knock it out, completely flipped the game. So shout out to 51. Had a great showing yesterday in Detroit. And then how about the rookie, Donovan Jackson? After going back and watching the film, this guy was absolutely unbelievable, man. I mean, the Vikings truly have a mauler at the interior of their offensive line. This guy was all over the football field yesterday. He was great specifically in pass blocking. Had a pass block grade of 78.1, overall PFF grade of 67.4. But this guy was getting downhill. He was getting after it. Only allowed 1 pressure, had only 1 penalty. And we're starting to see this guy, which is so promising for the future for if you're a Vikings fan. We're seeing Donovan Jackson get better each and every week. And this past week against the Detroit Lions, probably his best showing, going up against a very physical, a very talented defensive line over there in Detroit. So Donovan Jackson had a great game. And then how about Harrison Smith? Harry the Hitman. Unk still got it. Number 22, he had a fantastic game yesterday, and he was all over the football field. I mean, the Vikings were lining this guy up all over. And he also had 64 snaps, so he's clearly, playing a lot more than he was over the past couple of games. But hear this out. This is where Harrison Smith aligned yesterday. He had 7 snaps at the defensive line, his most of the season. He had 21 snaps as a box safety. He had 34 snaps as a free safety. He had 2 snaps as a slot corner. And this guy was all over the football field. He had a tackling grade of 81.9, keeping guys in front. Really was the only player in the Vikings secondary who was tackling at a high level. And that batted ball he had on that 3rd and 4, Lions still in their own territory. Goff feels the pressure. He's trying to get it out quick to his hot. Harrison Smith jumps up, bats it down, had a massive play, and he also allowed 0 yards on the entire game yesterday in Detroit. So I'll ask you guys this. Is it a player? Is it a coach? Kevin O'Connell, Brian Flores? Who gets your game ball from yesterday's game? For me personally, I think I still got to go with Brian Flores. But if I'm getting it to a guy defensively, it's tough to pick just one. I'm between 3, either Cashman, Hargrave, or Eric Wilson. I think I'll probably have to give it to Hargrave. He was that dominant on the defensive line. But you guys let me know your thoughts. We'll get on out of here. Let's go Vikes.